I didn't say a word when they threw me to the ground. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just listened as the slam of the apartment door, an apartment that was once mine, sealed something more than an entryway. It sealed a betrayal. The police helped me to my feet while Claire spoke quickly, as if trying to convince herself that what she was doing was right. She's trespassing on private property, officer. We've already told her she can't stay. This is my house now. The canvas bag I managed to grab held a couple of changes of clothes, an old jacket, and the porcelain mug I used every morning. My husband's mug. The only thing I hadn't lost yet. Sadie watched from her bedroom window, motionless, her eyes wide, as if she had just seen something die that she didn't fully understand. A neighbor muttered something, but no one intervened. No one said, "That's the owner." No one said anything. The apartment smelled like roast chicken that night. Claire had made a special dinner, she said, to celebrate Mark's birthday, even though I knew he hated family gatherings. The table was set with new napkins, gleaming silverware, and a bottle of wine that had been open for hours. The light flickered slightly over the centerpiece, where they had placed some artificial flowers, too colorful to be real. Claire laughed loudly, a forced sound. Mark just nodded. I tried to eat, but my stomach tightened with every word I heard. "Mom, you should think about resting more, not worrying about things around the house. You've done so much, don't you think?" Claire said, serving me more chicken without me asking. I smiled without responding. Sadie watched me from her seat next to her father. She played with the peas on her plate, silent. No one spoke of my husband. No one mentioned the years I had spent paying off this roof over our heads, keeping that kitchen running, saving quietly while they grew up. The family had started speaking a different language. Now they talked in terms of property, efficiency, the future. There was no affection left, only balance sheets. I felt it. That day, though I didn't want to see it, the first signs came as small things. One afternoon, I couldn't open the desk drawer where I kept my important documents. The key wasn't in its usual spot. Claire said I had probably lost it, that I could get a copy made. Another night, the internet went out, and when I asked Mark if he could reset the router, he said they had changed it, and it now had a new password. For security, he didn't give it to me. I laughed. I thought I was overreacting, seeing ghosts where there were none. But I started to look closer. The bank account showed a strange login from another device. A small transfer, but unauthorized. I thought it had been a mistake. Then 2 checkbooks disappeared from the drawer where I kept them, and a letter from the bank arrived, with my name on it, but addressed to Claire. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a confirmation of a change in ownership. At the express request of Mrs. Amelia, I hadn't requested anything. I tried to talk about it. That night, while Sadie was drawing in the living room, I sat down in the kitchen with Claire. I showed her the letter. She didn't look at it. She just said, "Oh, Mom, that was part of the paperwork you signed months ago. Don't you remember? You said you trusted me." I didn't sign anything that said this. "Yes, you did. And if you didn't, you should have. You're confused." Confused. The word hit me harder than any other. As if everything I had lived, raised, and sustained could be invalidated with a single phrase. Mark walked into the kitchen at that moment. He poured himself a glass of water and said without looking at me, "It would be best if you started considering other living arrangements, Amelia. We don't want this to get ugly." That night I locked myself in my room. I searched for documents, went through folders. Everything was altered. They had copied my signature, scanned papers, used my computer without permission. And then I understood. It wasn't confusion. It was a plan, a meticulous one, disguised as help. Arthur, my husband's old friend, called me a few days later. He always called on important dates. He told me he had tried to visit, but that Claire told him I was getting treatment and couldn't receive visitors. Treatment. I sat on the bed. I couldn't breathe properly. Arthur isn't a fool. He asked me if I was okay. I didn't know what to tell him. I just replied, "I'm seeing things more clearly now." The cameras appeared 2 weeks later, one in the living room, another in the hallway. Claire said it was to protect us. Mark installed them. They didn't ask for my permission. I just saw them out of the corner of my eye, as if they weren't real, as if my life no longer belonged to me. Sadie approached me one afternoon when I was alone in the kitchen. She just stared at me and said, "Grandma, are you going to leave?" "Why do you ask that?" "Because Mom said this isn't your house anymore. But I want you to stay." I didn't sleep that night. I started recording audio notes, taking pictures of the documents I still had, printing screenshots from my email, and saving copies to a USB drive that I hid inside an old vase. I made an appointment with the lawyer who had worked with my husband. I didn't have much hope. I just wanted to know if I was crazy or if they had really robbed me. I wasn't crazy. He told me the property transfer they did wasn't valid, that they could nullify it, that there was evidence of coercion, that none of it was legal, that my trust had been manipulated. I didn't cry. I just nodded. I left his office with a folder full of copies, a plan in my mind, and a new silence in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, something denser, more determined. Claire started acting like the owner. She removed my favorite chair from the dining room. She put her paintings on the walls. She asked me not to use the main bathroom because it was for guests. Mark ignored me completely, as if I no longer existed. I just observed, saved everything, documented, didn't argue, didn't ask, didn't question. I became invisible by choice. Sadie left a note under my door one night. "What they're doing to you is wrong. I believe you." I kept it inside my porcelain mug, the one that had belonged to my husband, the only thing they hadn't taken from me. Then, the day came. Claire arrived with the police. She said I was violating her privacy, that she had told me many times, that she had no more patience. They asked me to leave, to take my things. They looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if I had never been a mother, as if I had never washed their clothes, cared for their fevers, hidden their mistakes. I grabbed the bag, put in what I could. The mug, a blouse, a pair of socks, a photo from my wedding. They helped me out. "Claire didn't touch me," she just said. "This isn't your house anymore." Mark smiled with his arms crossed. Sadie watched from upstairs, unable to do anything. And then, as I crossed the threshold, I felt something I didn't expect: relief. Because they thought they had won, but they forgot one detail. The cab driver asked me where I wanted to go. I didn't know how to answer. I gave the address of a cheap motel I remembered seeing near the hospital where Sadie was born. I didn't have a reservation. I didn't have an immediate plan. I just had a canvas bag, a phone with low battery, and a folder of copied documents hidden among my clothes. The receptionist looked at me with curiosity. She offered me a simple room, no breakfast included. The elevator went up slowly, creaking. The hallway smelled of dampness, and the walls had stains like old shadows. I locked myself in. I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the bag. I took out the mug. I placed it on the nightstand. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes. I needed to think. They thought I was defeated, but they had made an unforgivable mistake. They had set me free. The first message I sent was to Arthur. I wrote just 3 words. "They kicked me out. Call me." It took him less than 10 minutes to dial. His voice was deep, steady, as if he were holding back a storm. "Amelia, are you okay?" "I'm awake." Finally. We met the next day in a small diner, the kind that still uses cloth tablecloths and serves real coffee. Arthur listened to me without interruption. I didn't need to say much. He already knew more than I thought. He had been suspicious for a while. He showed me screenshots of Claire's social media posts, photos of the remodeled apartment, comments from acquaintances talking about the new life they were starting. One of the posts said, "After years of struggling, we finally have our own place." Signed by Mark. Arthur closed his phone and looked me in the eye. "We can fight this, Amelia, but not with anger, with precision." I nodded. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice, silent, unrelenting. I started sleeping little. I would get up early, go through files, request duplicate documents, contact old neighbors. I even went to the bank with the folder in my hand. I explained everything. I showed them the evidence. People looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. One woman at the bank, seeing the date of the transfers, said, "This isn't right. Something's wrong here." She printed records for me, signed copies. Every document was another piece of the puzzle. The lawyer reviewed everything. He said it was more serious than he'd thought. Forgery of a signature, emotional manipulation, possible financial abuse. He explained that if we handled it correctly, I could not only get the apartment back, but also leave enough evidence to prevent them from doing it again. Not to other people, not to Sadie. I shuddered, because deep down, that's what hurt the most. That my granddaughter was growing up in the middle of a lie. I didn't reply to Claire's messages. She texted me 3 times. The first, brief, saying she was sorry things had gone this far. The second, blaming me for not wanting to understand. The third, warning me that if I insisted on making trouble, they would take legal action. I didn't reply. I saved them. I printed them. Every word was a disguised confession. I changed my number. I closed my social media accounts. I registered a new mailing address. I began to build what the lawyer called my own legal life. Everything that for years I had shared with them, I now had to rebuild as if they had never existed. I went to the notary public, the county clerk's office, the office of property records. Every step hurt, but every recovered paper was a victory. Sadie managed to call me one afternoon from the school office phone. She told me she missed me, that she didn't understand why no one would let her talk to me. That Claire said I was sick with resentment. I bit my lip. I didn't say anything bad about her mother. I just told her, "I'm okay, my love. I'm building something. For us. So you'll always have a place where you're welcome. Will you come back?" They don't know it, but I never really left. I started recording daily audio diaries, not for evidence, but for me, to remember who I was. I recorded thoughts, memories, phrases that Alfred, my husband, used to say to me. The one who waits with dignity wins with time. In one of the recordings I said, "They think they won, but they forgot I still have the original deeds. The notarized copy, the video of the real signature, and the truth isn't erased with a kitchen remodel." Arthur helped me find a handwriting expert. He compared my signature with the one on the supposed transfer. He confirmed it was a forgery. He wrote a report. He had it certified. It was the key piece of evidence. The following week, we filed the lawsuit. It wasn't just to get the apartment back. It was for damages, for emotional distress, for abuse. The lawyer told me they would probably try to settle, that Mark was a skilled manipulator, that he would say everything was consensual, but there was too much evidence. And best of all, everything had been done without witnesses, without legal recordings, without legal counsel. Just them against me. But I wasn't alone anymore. I lived in that motel for almost a month. Then I rented a room in the house of a widow, Carol, who let me use her kitchen and offered me tea in the afternoons. We didn't talk much, but she understood what it was like to lose something you've cared for your whole life. On her bookshelf, she had old photos and a jar with letters her husband wrote to her before he died. She told me once, "There's no worse loneliness than being surrounded by people who pretend to love you." The lawsuit was officially served. Claire wrote to me immediately. This time she didn't use euphemisms. She called me ungrateful. Said I was destroying her. That Mark was considering suing me for defamation. I didn't respond. Arthur took me for a walk that afternoon in a park we used to visit with Alfred. I sat on a bench and told him, "I don't know if I'm going to win, but I'm not afraid anymore. And for me, that's already winning something." One night, near the anniversary of Alfred's death, I decided to do something symbolic. I went to the apartment building. I didn't go in. I just walked around the neighborhood. I looked at the windows. The lights were on. I heard Mark's voice laughing and Claire yelling something at Sadie. I walked over to the tree where Alfred used to park his old Mustang. I touched the bark. I left a flower at its base. And I walked away. I didn't look back again. The first hearing was scheduled. I didn't need to speak much. The documents spoke for themselves. Their lawyer tried to get the case dismissed. He said it was all a misunderstanding, that I was old, confused, manipulated by third parties. I felt small for a moment. But then I remembered everything I had gathered, everything I had lost, and even more, everything I could still get back. I sat up straight, I breathed, and I waited. When the judge reviewed the expert's report, he frowned. He looked at Claire, then at Mark. He asked them if they could explain how they obtained the signature. They remained silent. The lawyer muttered something. The judge called for a recess. My lawyer smiled at me for the first time. "They're starting to sweat," he said. "That's good." That night, back in my room, I made tea with fresh mint Carol had given me. I sat by the window. It was raining softly. I took out the porcelain mug. I filled it. I recorded an audio message. They didn't win. They just took advantage while I was sleeping. But I'm awake now, and this time, I'm not going back to sleep. I didn't sleep well. But I woke up with the feeling of having laid the first brick of something new. Not a house. A boundary. An invisible trench. Where no one would ever touch my dignity again. There were still many hearings, pieces of evidence, depositions to come. But I had already taken the hardest step, letting go of the idea that blood guarantees loyalty. Now, all that was left was to move forward, quietly, precisely, without losing my soul. Because if Alfred taught me anything, it was this. The victory that matters is the one that lets you look in the mirror without looking away. And I no longer looked away for anyone. The second hearing was different, less cold, more tense. Claire wouldn't look at me. She arrived dressed in neutral colors, her hair pulled back, her expression empty. Beside her, Mark seemed irritated to be there. He tapped his foot constantly, as if he couldn't bear the silence of the courtroom. Their lawyer tried a different strategy, to portray us as a family broken by misunderstandings, by old unresolved wounds. He talked about my emotional instability after Alfred's death, about my difficulty adapting to generational changes. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just watched, with steady eyes, my breathing controlled. My lawyer presented a new piece of evidence. A video where Claire was clearly seen signing some papers at a desk I had never seen before. The angle wasn't perfect, but her voice could be heard. She was saying, "Mark, are you sure there's no turning back from this?" And he replied, "Trust me. It's legal. No one is going to say anything." The judge paused the video. He called for silence. Claire closed her eyes. Mark swallowed hard. Their lawyer asked to suspend the hearing. Denied. We moved on. Every minute in that room was an exposed wound, but also a step toward the truth. I left the courthouse with my legs trembling, not from fear, from the weight of so many years of silence. Arthur was waiting for me outside. He offered me his arm. We walked without speaking. He took me to a small bakery with wooden tables and the smell of freshly baked dough. He ordered me a latte and an almond pastry, like the ones Alfred used to bring me on cold days. When I tasted it, my lower lip trembled, but I didn't cry. I just said, "Sometimes winning hurts more than losing." "Why?" "It confirms that we could have avoided it." Arthur nodded. He didn't contradict me. He held my gaze. In silence, Sadie texted me that night. "I saw something weird on Mom's phone. Are you okay? Can I see you?" I replied with a time and place. Sunday, at 4, in the square by the old movie theater. She arrived on time, wearing a red scarf and carrying a notebook under her arm. She hugged me tightly. She didn't ask anything. She just looked at me with her eyes full of that strange mixture that children of victims have, shame and love. "Mom says you turned against us," she whispered. "But I remember you took care of me even when your hands hurt, when no one else noticed. I'm not against you, Sadie. I'm for the truth, even if it hurts." She showed me drawings of a house, of a woman with white hair sitting by a window, of a mug of tea, of a tree with a flower at its base. I bit my lip. They were our memories. She was preserving them, even while the rest tried to erase them. "Can I come see you again?" "Whenever you want. This will be your safe place. No one will take that from you." The following days were slow, full of silences. Carol, the woman I was living with, gave me an old radio she no longer used. I turned it on one night and listened to a classical music program. I fell asleep to the violins, dreaming of fields I never visited. In the morning, I returned to the routine of gathering evidence. The lawyer found a serious error in the deed they had submitted. A non-existent file number. A signature from a notary who had died years before the supposed signing. It was a bombshell. We added it to the file. Claire called me. For the first time in weeks, her voice was different, broken. She asked to meet. I hesitated, but I agreed, at a coffee shop near the central bus station. She arrived alone. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes. She sat across from me. Didn't order anything. Just spoke. I don't know when we stopped being us. I didn't answer. Mark told me everything would be easier this way. That it was for our own good. That you were getting old. That you didn't care about the apartment. That you hardly used it. That it was a way to secure our future. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Because it was easier than accepting that we were robbing you. She fell silent. I took out a folded paper. It was a copy of the original property deed. With my signature, with the date, with Alfred's name. I placed it on the table. This is what you ignored. This is what you tried to erase. She looked at it. Didn't touch it. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to fix this. You can't. But you can stop lying. She left without saying goodbye. I stayed a while longer. Looking out the window, the world went on. Cars, bicycles, a couple arguing on the corner. The universe was indifferent to the pain of a betrayed mother. But inside me, something solidified. It wasn't hatred. It was resolve. Days later, a letter arrived from their lawyer. A settlement proposal. They would give up the property if the lawsuit was dropped and a non-disclosure agreement was signed. I tore it up without reading further. I didn't want their silence. I wanted my truth, and I would have it. Arthur helped me prepare for the third hearing. He knew the judge from years ago, not as friends, but from having shared complex cases. He told me, "This guy doesn't tolerate phonies. If we stay the course, they'll fall on their own." And so it was. The hearing began with the expert's testimony about the forged document. Then we showed the bank movements, the suspicious transfers from my account to a shell company in the name of one of Mark's acquaintances. A link, a trap. Mark exploded. He shouted that it was all a conspiracy, that I was senile, that Arthur was manipulating me. The judge called for order. He warned him that if he continued, he would be removed. Claire lowered her head. She said nothing. Their lawyer asked for a break. It wasn't granted. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting. Someone had leaked the case. I didn't speak, but I saw the headlines the next day. Daughter evicts mother from her own apartment. Possible family fraud. The shame was no longer mine. It was theirs. Carol made me soup that night. She left a lit candle and a hand-knitted blanket for me. I slept soundly for the first time in months. I dreamed of Alfred. He was telling me, "You're doing well, almost there." I woke up with a strange feeling, not of relief, of clarity. I got a call from the court. The judge had issued an injunction. The property was frozen. No one could sell it, rent it, modify it. It was mine again, legally. But the final trial was still to come. The closing, the settling of accounts. Sadie came to see me, with a new notebook. She was writing down phrases she remembered me saying. One said, "Silence can also be an answer." Another, "You don't beg for affection where you should be given love." She hugged me. She left a dried flower between the pages. "Can I leave something here?" she asked shyly. "Anything you want." She took out a key, the one I had given her years ago. She left it on the table, just in case I ever don't know where to go. I didn't know what to say. I just closed my eyes and nodded. The last week before the final trial was strange. Mark disappeared. Claire stopped attending the hearings. Her lawyer tried to buy time. He failed. The judge set a final date. Arthur accompanied me to sign the last documents. The lawyer told me, "You're one step away from closing this chapter. But it's not going to sound like a loud victory. It will be like locking a door and throwing the key into the sea." I smiled. That's all I need. That night, I walked to the apartment building. I didn't go in. I stood in front of the gate, locked, like my past. I sat on a nearby bench. I turned on Carol's radio. A piano piece was playing. The wind moved the leaves. I took out the porcelain mug. I placed it on my lap, empty, as it should be. And I stayed there, waiting for Judgment Day. Not with fear, with certainty. The day of the final judgment dawned with a gray sky, heavy with a thick humidity that seeped through the cracks of the soul. I dressed in the same blouse I wore to Alfred's funeral. Not for nostalgia, for strength, because that time I had to hold a broken family together. And this time, I was going to hold up my truth alone. Carol made me a coffee. She left it on the table without a word. Arthur arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, with a manila envelope under his arm and serene eyes, like someone who has already seen the end before anyone else. The courtroom was fuller than other times. There were reporters, onlookers, even a neighbor who used to greet me from her window. Claire arrived late. She sat down without looking at anyone. Her hair loose, her skin pale, her mouth tight. She didn't look like herself. Mark didn't show up. They say he left the country 2 days earlier, on a fake passport. Coward. Claire's lawyer tried to distance her from everything. He argued she was a victim of emotional manipulation, that she signed papers without understanding, that she trusted her husband like any trusting wife would. But the judge was not naive. His eyes were sharpened by years of trials where everyone tried to paint themselves as victims. My lawyer was impeccable. He showed every document, every inconsistency, every testimony. Even Arthur spoke. He told how Alfred had confided in him his worries about Mark's behavior, how they saw in him an ambition disguised as politeness. His voice was steady, firm, unadorned. When he finished, there was a thick silence, like when the lights go out in the middle of a conversation. "Mrs. Amelia," the judge finally said, "do you have anything else to say before the verdict?" I stood up. My knees cracked, but they didn't tremble. "I don't want punishment. I want memory. For this not to be repeated. For no mother to have to defend herself against her own blood. For love not to be used as an alibi to steal. For justice not to arrive when too much has already been cried." I sat back down. The judge nodded. It didn't take long. He declared the signed documents null and void. He restored ownership of the apartment to me. He ordered an investigation into Mark for fraud and money laundering. Claire was cleared of criminal charges, but with a considerable financial penalty. My daughter's face didn't change. Not a tear, not a gesture. I left the courthouse like someone returning from a long war. There was no celebration, just a different kind of silence, one that wasn't heavy. Arthur took my arm. We walked without hurry. That afternoon, Sadie came to the house with a bouquet of wildflowers. She hugged me so tightly that for a second I was a whole mother again. "Can we have tea again?" she asked. "Of course, my love." She poured the tea, turned on the radio. An old tango that Alfred used to hum was playing. I laughed. She did too. For the first time, we laughed without fear that someone would take it away from us. She showed me a notebook where she had written down everything that had happened, her way of understanding, of processing. "I want you to keep it, Grandma, because you don't forget, because you don't let things be erased." That night I slept with the notebook under my pillow. The following days were strangely calm. I visited the apartment. It was empty, vacant, as if no one had lived there. I found a box of my things tucked away on the balcony. Old photos, a scarf Alfred had knitted, a book with my name written in blue ink. I sat on the floor and cried, not for what was lost, but for what was recovered. I put the place back together, without help. I painted the walls, hung pictures, put up new curtains. I did it in silence, like someone preparing a room for a loved one. Arthur visited me often. He brought me soup, newspapers, stories. He told me about his youth, about his fear of growing old alone. One afternoon he told me, "It's never too late to start over, Amelia. You did it in the middle of a disaster." I looked at him and didn't know what to say. Because I had been reborn at 73. One Saturday, Claire showed up at the door. She didn't call, didn't write beforehand. She just arrived. I watched her from the window. I didn't open immediately. I took a second. When I opened it, she said nothing. She just held out a cardboard box. "This is yours. It never should have left here." Inside were letters, the ones I had written to her when she first moved in with Mark. Mother's letters, advice, recipes, silly phrases. I didn't know whether to cry or thank her. She gestured to come inside. I didn't respond, but I offered her a cup of tea. We sat without speaking. She looked at the floor. I looked out the window. "Is Sadie okay?" she finally asked. "Yes, with me. And stronger than ever." "Do you hate me?" "No. But I don't believe you either." She left shortly after, without saying goodbye, like a shadow. But that time it didn't hurt, because I no longer expected redemption. I just wanted to live. A month later, Arthur took me to the cemetery. We visited Alfred's grave. I brought his favorite flowers, white daisies. I spoke to him in a low voice. I told him everything. I told him it had taken a while, but in the end, I protected what was ours. Arthur stood to one side, respectfully. Then he said, "Do you think he would be proud?" "I don't know, but he would be at peace." We left arm in arm, like two old people who understand that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just walks beside you. One day, I received a letter from Claire, handwritten, in her trembling script. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that what I did wasn't out of hatred, but weakness. I let myself get dragged along. I was a coward. But thanks to you, Sadie has a different example. I don't know if we'll ever be able to talk like we used to, but you'll always be my mother, Claire." I didn't reply. I put the letter in Sadie's notebook, as proof, as a scar. Sadie now writes stories. She says she wants to tell stories that hurt but end with a sigh. She reads them to me out loud. I listen to her like someone clinging to the echo of something pure. Sometimes she draws Alfred with wings, or me with a cape. She says I'm her silent hero. I just smile, because in the end, I didn't win a legal battle. I won something deeper. The certainty that resisting, sometimes, is the most revolutionary act of love. And so, with my hands full of memory, I took a deep breath again. I became Amelia again. Not the mother, not the victim, not the plaintiff, just Amelia, whole, unbroken, indestructible. Sadie had gotten used to sleeping with the hallway light on, not out of fear, but out of habit. It was her way of saying that even though things were calmer, the dark wasn't trustworthy. I told her it was okay, that sometimes a dim light was also a kind of hug. Since that afternoon when Claire appeared and left that box of letters, something in the air had changed. Not a direct threat, but a rumor. As if the past was breathing near the door, waiting for a crack to slip through. Arthur came by less often. He had injured his knee and preferred to rest at his house. Still, we talked on the phone almost every day. He would read me old poems, the kind Alfred used to memorize in a low voice while he cooked. They did me good. They reminded me that beauty can coexist with pain without canceling it out. One morning, Sadie came home from school with a frown on her face. She hugged me before saying anything, as if she needed to make sure I was there, tangible. "Today, someone was talking about Mom," she whispered, dropping her backpack on the floor. "What did they say, my love?" "That she got back with Mark. That they found him in Florida. That they're together." I didn't say anything. I just sat down. The tea was steaming on the table, the sugar undissolved. Time stopped in that instant. The idea that Claire, after everything, had gone back to that man chilled me to the bone. Not out of disappointment, but out of danger. Because Mark wasn't just a manipulator. He was methodical, vengeful. He didn't leave loose ends. That night I checked the locks. I installed a new camera in the hallway. I called Arthur and asked for his help in digitally securing my accounts, my documents, even Sadie's school information. I didn't want to be paranoid. I wanted to be prepared. Arthur didn't ask questions, he just acted. 3 days later, everything was sealed, but something in my chest was still beating differently. 2 weeks later, I received an email notification. An attempted login to my old bank account, one I had closed after the trial, but which, due to a system error, was still active in old records. The attempt came from an IP address in the Cayman Islands. The connection wasn't a coincidence. I called the bank, canceled everything, closed the last open doors. That night, Claire called. I didn't know what to do. The screen flashed with her name like an old wound. "Hello," I answered, my voice firm. "Mom, are you okay?" "That depends." "Why do you ask?" "I heard you're looking for me, that you're saying things about me." "I don't need to look for you. You know where I am. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the facts. There was a long silence. Mark has changed. He's different. He says he's going to apologize to you, that he wants to clear everything up. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A dry, incredulous laugh, like someone hearing that fire wants to become water. And you believe him? I don't know. I'm confused. I'm alone. You're not alone, Claire. You chose to be where you are. And you chose to leave when we needed you most. Don't say that. You don't know everything I went through with him. You're right. I don't. And you don't know everything I went through because of your silence. I hung up, without yelling, without a goodbye. My hands were trembling, but not my soul. The next day, Sadie found a note on her locker at school. It wasn't signed. It just said, "Your grandmother isn't who you think she island. Ask about your father. Ask about the inheritance." The girl handed it to me without fear, just with curiosity, like someone who knows there's more to the story but needs it to be told without lies. Read it. I warmed some milk. We sat together on the sofa. I took her hand. Your father did many bad things, and your mother allowed many others. But you, Sadie, you came into this world to break that cycle. You don't need to carry what they couldn't handle. She nodded. She didn't cry. She just rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I just want to stay with you. Here, and here you'll stay." That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter. Not to Claire, not to Mark, to myself. A letter that said, "Amelia, you resisted. You don't need to go back to the past to understand yourself. You just need to protect what still beats, and keep going." I put the letter in the dresser drawer, where Alfred's photos, the will, and the post-trial documents were. What mattered was safe. Days later, Arthur came with news. I got a call from a lawyer in Miami. He says Mark is trying to sell a property in your name, that he wants to use old documents. And how did the lawyer know? Because Alfred, before he died, left me a letter with instructions. He asked me that if anything strange ever happened, to activate a wealth protection clause. I didn't understand it at the time, but I took it to the consulate. He paused. "And yes, you're protected, Amelia." I was silent. Arthur opened the letter. I read it. It was Alfred's handwriting. Clear, precise. A love letter disguised as foresight. If you're reading this, it's because you were afraid you were right. But it's also because you're still standing. Protect what we built. Not for me, for you, for Sadie. Because strong roots aren't easily torn out, I cried. Not from pain, from honor. Alfred had protected me even after he was gone. Not with weapons, with wisdom, with real love. Arthur and I had the document sealed. We registered it in 3 countries. Mark couldn't touch a single tile without being pursued by the law. But the war wasn't over. One Friday, Claire returned, this time with red eyes, with trembling hands, with a tattered soul. He ran off. He left me alone in our place in Florida. He took everything. He threatened me. He said if I talked, he'd make me disappear. I looked at her, not with pity, with controlled compassion. "And what do you want now?" "A safe place. Not money, not forgiveness. Just a place to sleep without being afraid. Sadie lives here. This space is sacred. If you come in with the truth, not with half-truths." She nodded. That night she slept on the sofa. She covered herself with the blanket my mother had knitted. She lay still, like a child hoping not to be noticed. Sadie watched her from a distance. She didn't get close. She didn't judge her. She just said, "Grandma, is she going to change?" I didn't know how to answer. Arthur came the next day. We talked in the kitchen. He asked if it was a good idea to have her in the house. I told him it wasn't an easy decision, but there was something worse than betrayal, indifference, and I didn't want to be like she had been with me. The days passed. Claire helped with the cleaning, made breakfast, took Sadie to school. She didn't talk much, but she was there, present. One night while we were washing dishes, she said to me, "I have no right to ask for anything, but if you can ever look at me without resentment, I've already won." I didn't answer. I just handed her the dish towel. We dried together, in silence. But a shadow appeared again. A notification, a threatening email, an unknown number. Mark had found our address. And this time he wasn't coming alone. The email had no subject line. Just a short sentence in the body. No signature. Ghosts always come back for what they think is theirs. It was early morning. The air smelled damp. Like an omen. I closed the laptop calmly, as if I didn't want to wake up the fear. Luna was asleep on the sofa. Sadie in her room, hugging her teddy bear. Arthur was half an hour away. I had texted him without explaining too much. Just, I need you to come now. And he understood. He always understood. I poured myself some tea. The sound of the boiling water was a domestic comfort, as if routine still existed within the chaos. It wasn't fear I felt. It was a new state, purer. A mother's watchfulness. Like a wolf that smells danger before it arrives. At 5 o'clock sharp, Arthur knocked on the door. Not with urgency, with respect. He came in with a small bag. He didn't ask anything. He sat down, took out a folder, and looked at me. This is what I have. Information on his movements, his accounts, immigration records. He's not alone. There's someone else protecting him. A corrupt lawyer in Miami. I slid the folder over without opening it. I didn't want details yet. I wanted a strategy. Is he here? Yes. He arrived in Jacksonville 3 days ago. Switched cars. He's using a fake passport, but his mistake was moving money from an account associated with Claire, and that gives him away. I looked toward the hallway. Claire was still asleep, her face pale, as if she carried centuries on her eyelids. She wasn't the same, and although the wound was deep, I didn't want to see her fall again. Do you think he'll come here? I don't know, but I do know he wants you weak, scared. If he achieves that, he wins. Sadie woke up early. She came into the kitchen and hugged Arthur as if he were her grandfather. He offered her toast with butter, and she smiled with that sweetness that only children who have seen darkness can have. She looked at me and said, I dreamed that Mom was crying, but someone was covering her mouth. My soul froze. I didn't say anything. I just stroked her hair and promised her that nothing bad was going to happen. Not again. That afternoon, while Claire was folding laundry, I noticed her wrists were bruised. I didn't ask. She didn't offer an explanation either. But in the way she arranged the clothes, in the precision with which she smoothed every edge, was all the guilt she carried. Mark is close, I told her without beating around the bush. She froze, the sheets in her hands, her breath caught. How do you know? Because men like him don't know how to lose. Because he thinks you still have something that belongs to him. I have nothing, only fear. That's exactly what he wants. The fear. That night Claire stayed up late. She asked to sleep in my room, on a mattress on the floor. I said yes, not out of compassion, but because understanding a daughter's panic is also part of being a mother. At 3 a.m, the landline rang, just once, like a warning, like a slap without a hand. I didn't answer. In the morning, we found the back garden gate open. No signs of entry, but muddy footprints. Arthur checked everything, installed new cameras, placed sensors on the windows. Still, we knew the real battle wasn't physical. It was psychological. The next day was silent, as if everyone knew something was coming. Claire didn't speak. Sadie drew in her room, and I wrote my will. Not for drama, for foresight. If something happened to me, everything would be clear. That afternoon I decided to go to the cemetery, to see Alfred, to breathe near his name carved in stone. I brought him carnations. He always said they were humble flowers, like him. Arthur accompanied me. We walked among the tombstones without hurry. I sat next to his and whispered, I don't know how to prepare for what's coming, but I'm not going to break. The wind blew hard. The dry leaves danced around us. Arthur took my hand. He told me that sometimes courage isn't about shouting, it's about staying, holding on, waiting for the right moment to strike a decisive blow. We returned as evening fell. We found the front door open. Not forced, no violence. Don't touch anything, Arthur said. He went in first. Checked room by room. Everything was the same, just one detail. On the table, a black rose. Artificial, with a note tied with red thread. The family you hide bleeds too. Soon everyone will talk. Claire collapsed. She fell to the floor. Arthur held her. I clenched my fists. It wasn't a game anymore. It was a direct threat, a provocation with an invisible signature. We called the police. They filed a report. They suggested protection measures. But we knew that the police, sometimes, arrive late. And Mark never played fair. That night I spoke with Claire alone. Tell me the truth. All of it. There's no more time for half-truths. She sat across from me, looked at the floor. Her lips trembled. When we went to Florida, he promised me a fresh start, but he isolated me. He took away my phone. He would hit me if I talked to anyone. He used my signature to sell properties. And he recorded my conversations to blackmail me. And what is he looking for now? He knows you have documents that could destroy him. He thinks they're still in the house. He didn't tell me, but I know. I showed her the safe that Arthur had installed months ago. Everything was there. Deeds, recordings, testimonies, letters. Evidence that could send him to prison for years. And he knew it. That dawn, we decided to move everything. Arthur contacted a federal judge, a friend of Alfred's. We arranged for a secure handover. At 6 o'clock, we left in silence. We left the house under police watch. Sadie went with a friend. Claire couldn't stop shaking. At the police station, we handed everything over. The judge received every folder, every flash drive. We signed the documents. By 11 o'clock in the morning, we had no more evidence. At home, only memories. We returned at noon. Sadie was drawing a tree with strong roots. She showed it to me and said, "This tree doesn't fall. It has grandma roots." I cried on the inside, and on the outside too. But the calm was short-lived. That night, someone cut the power to the neighborhood. Just our house. Arthur reacted quickly. He had a generator. We turned on the interior lights. Claire locked herself in the bathroom. Sadie was asleep. I took a kitchen knife, just in case. At 3 in the morning, a sharp knock on the door. Another. One more. Arthur went out with a flashlight. There was no one there, just an envelope on the ground. Inside, an old photo. Claire and Mark. In Florida. Hugging. On the back, a sentence. "If you talk, they die." Claire broke. She fell to her knees. She begged. She screamed. She told me she didn't know it would come to this. I told her the only thing a mother can say when her daughter is in ruins. "I'm going to protect you, even if you don't deserve it, because that's my way of loving." But I also told her, after this, everything changes. Don't hide anymore. Don't expect to be a victim. Fight. She nodded. At dawn, Arthur gathered us. Mark is cornered. The evidence is already in safe hands, but he will attack one last time. Don't doubt it, and we must be ready. I answered him. I will be. For me, for Sadie, for Alfred, and for Claire. Even though it was still hard for me to say it out loud, it was early morning when I woke to a low hum, as if something invisible had brushed my ear. I sat up in bed, my heart beating slowly but steadily. I didn't know if it had been a dream or a premonition, but I felt something was brewing. For days, Mark's silence had felt more dangerous than any shout. His absence had become strategic. When a manipulator goes quiet, it's not because he's given up. It's because he's plotting. I got up slowly so as not to wake Claire or Sadie. Arthur was sleeping on the living room sofa, a blanket over his legs and a closed book on his chest. I went to the kitchen to make some chamomile tea. As the water boiled, I thought about how we had reached this point. This house, once a haven of laughter and childhood scents, now felt like a makeshift trench. I held the mug in my hands and sat at the table. I had to decide. The time for waiting was over. I could no longer act defensively. I had to make my move. When Sadie woke up and found me in the kitchen, she sat across from me in silence. Her maturity continued to surprise me. She just said, "Do you know what you're going to do now, Grandma?" I nodded. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. It was incredible how this child had become my emotional anchor. I don't know how, but she always knew when to speak, when to listen, and when to just be there. That same morning, I asked Arthur to accompany me to the bank. I had to check the activity on the joint account that had remained in Claire's and my name after Alfred's passing. Reviewing the statements, I discovered what I had feared. There were recent transactions I hadn't authorized. Small transfers, card purchases, cash withdrawals. I didn't say anything. I asked the bank for physical copies of everything. I also requested a new access code and had the account blocked for digital operations until further notice. Arthur watched me without a word, but his eyes shone with a mix of pride and pain. He knew I had crossed an internal line. I wasn't defending myself anymore. Now I was counterattacking. That afternoon, when I returned home, Claire was on the phone in the backyard. I hid behind the window curtain and watched her. Her expression was tense. She was saying things like, "She suspects something and we have to move it up." It hurt to recognize Mark's voice on the other end of the call. I knew it by the way she lowered her gaze when he spoke, by how she nodded even though no one could see her. I didn't confront Claire. Not yet. Instead, I went up to my room and opened the old trunk where Alfred kept important documents. There I found a folder with deeds, property titles, stock certificates. I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers yellowed with time, and began to sort out what was useful. That night, I locked myself in the study with Arthur. I showed him everything. We decided to consult a trusted lawyer. It couldn't be someone high profile. It had to be someone who knew how to work in silence. We thought of David, an old friend of Alfred's who now lived in a nearby city. Arthur offered to contact him. For the next few days, I feigned routine. I cooked, did some knitting in the garden. I helped Sadie with her homework. I chatted with Claire about trivial things. I even smiled at Mark when we ran into him at the supermarket, as if I knew nothing. But every night, while everyone slept, I reviewed documents, saved copies, made whispered calls from the bathroom, jotted down dates, names, transactions. Then it happened. One morning, Sadie came home from school crying. She had seen a video on social media that left her confused. It was a recording edited by Mark, where Claire appeared crying, saying her mother was emotionally abusing her, that she felt like a prisoner in her own home, that she feared for her daughter's safety. They used old images, clipped audio, dramatic background music. They had uploaded it to a channel with thousands of followers. The comments were cruel. No one doubted what they saw. No one really knew me. Claire didn't know I had already seen it. When she came home, she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek as if nothing had happened. Sadie locked herself in her room. Arthur took my arm and whispered, "It's now, Amelia. There's no turning back." That night, I called David. I sent him all the documents by certified mail. I explained my plan. I was going to sell the apartment that was in my name, the one they thought was still theirs. I was going to transfer my share of the stocks to a protected account. I was going to change my will, but all without notice. For a week, I acted as if I were depressed. I walked slowly, spoke little, complained of imaginary aches. Claire offered me tea, stroked my hair, looked at me with a feigned sadness. Meanwhile, Mark continued his campaign on social media. The video went viral. Some local news outlets began to write sensationalist articles. When the day came to sign the sale, I left the house saying I was going to the doctor. Arthur was waiting for me on the corner, a folder in his hand. We signed everything in less than an hour. The money was transferred to an account that only David and I could access. I left a copy of the new will dated before any document they could fabricate. Legal, sealed, signed. I returned home in silence. I sat on the sofa, knitted a little. Claire asked if I felt better. I told her I didn't know. That same night, as we were having dinner, she mentioned she wanted to talk to me about something important. Mark was coming over for the weekend. He wanted us all to talk as a family. I nodded without looking at her. 2 days later, there was a loud knock on the door. It was Mark, accompanied by a man with a folder. He said he was a notary, that he had come to officiate a document stating that I was leaving the apartment in Claire's name as a lifetime gift. "Where is the original?" I asked calmly. Mark laughed. "We don't need the original. We've digitized it. We just need your signature." I stood up slowly, took a folder from my bag, placed it on the table and said, "That won't be possible. This property has already been sold, and this is the deed, with a signature, date, and legal validity. Any attempt at appropriation now constitutes fraud." Mark turned pale. Claire didn't understand. She put her hand to her chest. She looked at her husband. He ignored her. He tried to snatch the folder from me. Arthur appeared from the hallway, recording with his cell phone. "This is all being documented. It has already been sent to our lawyer and the local DA's office," he said in a firm voice. Mark shouted. Claire burst into tears. Sadie ran down the stairs and hugged me. I said nothing more. I stood up, took my bag, caressed Sadie's face, and walked out the front door. I didn't need to stay in that house. It no longer belonged to me. The important thing was that they no longer belonged to me either. I slept that night at Arthur's house, in peace, in silence. The phone vibrated nonstop. I didn't answer it. I sat by the large window, watching the sun set behind the buildings, painting the sky a wounded orange. Sadie had told me that Claire was beside herself, screaming all over the house that she had found the lawyer's documents and had seen the transfers. But I didn't move. I felt no fear, no guilt, not even sadness. Just a cold, dense certainty. They couldn't touch me anymore. Arthur watched me from the other end of the table, in silence. He had brought me a scone and some cookies that tasted like childhood. His presence anchored me. He didn't say much, but his company alone was a shield. He knew more of my history with Alfred than anyone. And now he was the only one who didn't look at me with demands or reproach, just with that sad tenderness of someone who had also lost a lot, and yet still chose to stay. "Are you sure about what you did?" he finally asked, without raising his voice. I nodded without looking. The decision had been made weeks ago, since the day I heard Claire say I was a burden. Since I saw Mark practicing his fake good son-in-law face in front of the notary while slipping my papers into his briefcase as if they were his, there were no traces of naivety left in me. The woman who had signed that power of attorney with blind trust no longer existed. In her place remained an old mother, but not a defeated one. A woman who had loved too much, given too much, but who had now reclaimed the most sacred thing, her dignity. My plan had not been improvised. On the contrary, I prepared it for weeks, in silence, with surgical patience. I recovered the deeds to the apartment that was still in my name. I legally transferred the other one, the one I had put in Claire's name, to a conditional donation, with clauses for reversion. Something my lawyer, a meticulous and discreet man, had drafted with surgical precision. No one could take anything from me without going through me first. While Claire and Mark thought they had me in checkmate, I had already withdrawn my money from the joint account, closed the linked cards, and created a new financial identity. Sadie helped me with the digital side. It was she who taught me how to save the recordings, encrypt the documents, protect my files. She became my accomplice, without fully knowing what she was doing. But she did it out of love, out of that blind loyalty that only grandchildren have for the grandparents who watch them grow. The final piece of the plan was silence. I withdrew. I moved to a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Without saying a word, Claire received a formal letter informing her that her access to the funds was blocked for an audit. Mark, for his part, received a legal notice for the misuse of my documents. Neither of them reacted with maturity. The same day I moved, they knocked on my door, screamed, cried, accused me of being a traitor, a manipulator. Claire said I had abandoned her. Mark tried to scare me with veiled threats about legal consequences, but there were no cracks in what I did. Every move was documented, every decision reviewed. My lawyer was ready, and so was I. Sadie came the next day. Her eyes were red. She sat next to me and took my hand. "Grandma, Mom is out of control. She says you're going to ruin her life, that she has nowhere to live, that this is all revenge." "And what do you think?" I asked her in a low voice. "I think she never understood how much you gave her, and that you didn't have to keep paying for her decisions anymore." We cried in silence. They weren't tears of sadness, but of cleansing, of decompression after so much accumulated pressure. I asked her to take care of herself, not to get dragged down, and that whenever she wanted to come back, my door would be open, but this time, as a visitor. The days passed. Arthur visited me every afternoon. We played cards, drank tea. Sometimes we walked in the park. Life was beginning to feel like my own. Not perfect or new, but mine. I no longer had to justify myself. No longer had to watch my words. The apartment smelled of jasmine, like when I lived with Alfred. I had started planting lavender on the balcony again, even though it was hard for me to bend down. One morning, while organizing a box of old papers, I found a picture of Claire as a little girl. She was smiling with all her teeth, covered in paint, in the garden of the house. My hands trembled. That child I had raised with so much love. At what point did she become someone capable of throwing me out on the street? What did I do wrong? But it wasn't time for blame. It was time for acceptance. Sometimes, loving doesn't save. Sometimes, giving everything isn't enough. And that doesn't make what we gave any less valuable. That evening, I received a text. It was from Mark. "This isn't going to end like this. We're going to sue you for fraud and for manipulating Sadie. Be careful." I didn't reply. I saved a screenshot, sent it to the lawyer, and then turned off my phone. I made myself some tea. I sat on the sofa. I watched the night fall without hurry, without asking permission. The silence was deep, but not empty. It was a silence that healed, that closed a wound that had been open for years. Arthur arrived a little later, with a bag of croissants. "You seem calmer," he said, placing it on the table. "I am. And now I wait. They still don't understand that they can't touch me anymore." Sadie stopped by the next day. She had a notebook in her hand. She left it on the table, gave me a kiss, and left without saying much. When I opened it, I found dozens of drawings and phrases. Phrases she had written while everything was happening. Notes on how she saw me, on what she heard at home, on how she had understood, in the midst of the chaos, who I really was. My grandma is strong, but she doesn't shout. She knows things that others don't see. My mom thinks she wins when she hurts someone, but really, she just empties herself out. I cried. Inside, in silence. I closed the notebook carefully and understood that, whatever happened with Claire or Mark, I had already recovered the most important thing. My reflection. I no longer saw myself as a victim. I saw myself as a whole woman, wounded but dignified. Someone who got up off the floor without making a sound. And they, the ones who threw me out, still didn't know that the real blow was yet to come. The sun filtered through the window of the small apartment where I now lived, but that light didn't bring the warmth it should have. It was a cold, relentless light that seemed to point out every imperfection on the walls, every crack in the floor, as if the world wanted to remind me that nothing was as it was before. Still, I felt an unexpected strength upon waking that morning. Something had shifted inside me during the night, a determination that hadn't left me for weeks. The certainty that this time would be different. Sadie arrived early, with her big eyes and that tenderness that always flowed from her effortlessly. She held a thick notebook and a couple of sealed letters. "Grandma," she said, getting straight to the point, "I know this is hard, but it's time for you to do this." I took the letters, opened them slowly. They were legal documents that Arthur and my lawyer had prepared in secret. Signed complaints, collected evidence, recorded testimonies. Everything ready to counter the dirty war that Claire and Mark were trying to wage against me. They had made mistakes one after another, thinking they could break me. But they underestimated the will of a mother who had fought for years and who now had nothing left to lose. Claire hadn't shown up at the last hearing to discuss the ownership of the house or the management of the accounts. She didn't answer my calls or Sadie's messages, who insisted on keeping communication open, even though she knew it was in vain. Instead, Mark continued with his veiled threats, trying to influence family and mutual friends, to isolate me so that it would seem like I was the aggressor in this twisted story. But Arthur was with me, strong and firm as always. "You're not alone," he reminded me, as he helped me organize the papers on the desk. "They think you can be intimidated, but they don't know your story." It was true. No one really knew the story behind that woman who seemed weak on the outside, but who burned with an ancestral strength on the inside. My story was one of resistance, of broken love, of betrayed promises, but also of a justice that didn't depend on the law, but on the truth. One day I received an unexpected visit. Claire appeared at the door with the look of someone who has lost everything. She wasn't the arrogant and dismissive woman I remembered, but a shadow of herself, with tears that never quite fell. She looked at me with anger, with desperation, with a resentment that no longer scared me. "Why?" she asked, her voice broken. "Why are you doing this to us?" "I'm not doing anything to you, Claire," I answered calmly. "I'm just stopping you from destroying me." Her face tensed, and for a moment I thought she would attack, that she would launch another lie, another accusation. But instead, she lowered her head and whispered, "I don't know who I am without your support." It was then that Sadie appeared behind her, taking her hand, and said in a firm voice, "Mom, this has to change. We can't go on like this." It was the first time in months that I saw a possibility of reconciliation. Not a naive reconciliation, but one born of truth and respect. Mark, for his part, was quick to counterattack. They sent letters, messages, and even tried to use some friends to pressure me. But I was prepared. Every move of theirs was anticipated, every word recorded. Arthur and I worked to dismantle their lies and expose their true intention, to control everything, including Claire, regardless of the damage they caused. Meanwhile, Sadie became the bridge that united us. She didn't judge, she listened, she mediated. Thanks to her, Claire began to understand the magnitude of what she had lost and the depth of my sacrifice. And I, in turn, learned to listen to her without fear or resentment. But the battle didn't end there. The darkest night came when Mark tried something desperate. A fraudulent attempt to take over a part of the family assets without going through legal channels. He thought that would destabilize us. It was a fatal mistake. Arthur, with his cunning and experience, discovered the plan before it could be executed. "They're not going to succeed," he told me in a confident voice. "This time, we're going to win." And we won. Justice began to move in our favor. The complaints, the evidence, the truth came to light. Claire, although hurt, began to open her eyes. Mark, cornered, lost his facade of a successful and honest man, revealing himself for what he really was, a manipulator who took advantage of the vulnerability of those who should have been his family. The following months were about rebuilding. Not everything went back to the way it was, nor do I think it should have, but something changed. We learned to see each other with new eyes, to accept the wounds, and to heal the cracks with patience and true love. Sadie stayed by my side, a beacon in the storm, reminding me that family isn't always perfect, but it can be chosen every day. One afternoon, while walking with Arthur in the park, he said to me, "You know, Amelia, what you did wasn't just defending your assets. It was defending your dignity. That's what no one can take from you." And in that sentence, I felt the peace I was looking for. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of having fought with all my strength for what was right. For me, for Alfred, for Claire, for Sadie. Because in the end, the real victory is not defeating the enemy, but finding yourself in the midst of the chaos.